Hi, so we're now ready to start Chapter 2, which is titled Organizing and Summarizing Data. In Section 2.1, we're going to look at specifically how to organize qualitative data. Right? So remember, qualitative data is data that's putting things into categories, right? And they could be numbers, right? Like a zip code is an example of a number, but it is a qualitative variable, right? And remember, the alternative is a quantitative variable, which is a measurement. Right. So we're going to be working with qualitative data in this section. Through most of the examples, I'm going to reference this data set that's described here, and you can get the file, which is located in Canvas under data sets in modules. Right. So you can find that there. Also, this coding here, this is data from the textbook, so I can show you how to access that from in StatCrunch directly from the textbook as well. It makes it a little easier to pull in, and then I'll also show you. I have another data file in the Canvas modules, and I'll also show you that you can just copy and paste like data into StatCrunch to use. Right, so I'll show you how to do that. So the data we'll be looking at a lot in this section is data representing the days of the week that an order was placed for groceries using an online grocery service at the Marion Meyer. Right? And then this data here is an example of raw data. Right? So you can see here, definition of raw data is data that is not organized. Right? So notice this data, as it's written, is not organized. Right? So something that we'll be looking at in this section is being able to organize data in a manageable form. Right? So we want to take the data that's been collected and put it in something that's meaningful, that help us make decisions or display the data. So there's some different ways that we can organize data. We can organize data in tables and graphs or numerical summaries, so like mean, standard deviation, those kind of things. So we're going to handle numerical summaries in Chapter 2, but we'll look at tables and graphs in Chapter 2. Right? So the numerical summaries will be in the next chapter. Right? So this first objective, we're going to organize qualitative data in tables. So you need a couple of terms to be able to do this. So a frequency distribution lists each category of data and the number of occurrences for each category of data, right? So you're listing the frequency, right? And then another term to look at is relative frequency. So relative frequency is where you take the frequency divided by the total number of frequencies for that data. So you're finding like 8% of observations within a category, right? And you can see there's a formula here to help you figure that out, and we'll go over some examples. And then so a relative frequency distribution is going to list each category of data and then also list the relative frequency. So let's look at example 1. So on some of these examples, I want to do it by hand, and then also show you how to do in StatCrunch, right? So doing something in StatCrunch is going to be more useful to you, or using some kind of technology, because typically we have lots and lots of data, and doing it by hand is really impractical and also leaves room for error. But I want to do it by hand so you can also get a feel for what's being done and the meaning behind everything. Right? So first, let's do this by hand. So we're going to use that Meyer data set, and we want to construct a frequency distribution of day of the week. So we'll have day, so we're basically just making like a table. I'll list day, tally, leave a column for tallies, and then frequency. So then the days, we could do Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and so forth. right? And then the tallies, where you can just mark tallies for when you're looking at the data, right? So, for example, if I come up here, you know, we have Wednesday and Friday, right? So I can check Wednesday and Friday off, and then come down here and mark 1 for Wednesday, 1 for Friday, right? And then the next is Thursday and then Friday, so I'll mark those off. Thursday, Friday, right? And then just, you know, make tally marks, right? So so I would pause the video, fill in the tally marks, and then we'll go over the you'll see my solution. All right, so now you should have tallied up all the data, and then you can turn those into numbers in the frequency, right? So for example, for Sunday, I have a total of 8 tallies, so I can write 8 down for the frequency, right? And you can do that for all of them, right? And something I want to point out is this tally column is mainly just used for you know, to make it easier, simpler to come up with the total frequency, right? So typically we don't report that, don't show this. So more along the lines of like a final answer would be shown in this table, right, by the star, right? So where we're just showing the day and the total frequency. All right, so now what I'd like to do is show you how to do this in StatCrunch. So I'm going to open up my math lab, go to StatCrunch, open, and then I'm going to do data sets from your textbook, because I know this data set I took from a problem, so it was in chapter 2, and see, I told you the name of it at the top of the notes. It was 2-1-23, so I can find that here, and so it just opens it automatically in StatCrunch for me, so I don't have to copy and paste. Makes it pretty nice, right? So then what I want to do here to get a frequency distribution is I want to go to stat, and then go to tables, and then frequency, and then I'll select day for my variable that I'm hoping for, and frequency and relative frequency are already selected. I'm going to go ahead and leave them both selected, and then hit compute, and then here is some information for me. So we're going to talk about relative frequency in a minute, so you can kind of ignore that column, but that way I don't have to repeat this. But you can see here the frequency is what we were after. So we have Sunday 8, Monday 5, Thursday 7, or Tuesday 7, so forth. So these two columns is what we were after, right? And then notice here also there's a count at the top, and that just tells me, you know, the total pieces of data that we have. So we have 42 in our count, right? So that's going to be helpful in the next next part. Right. So let me just write down kind of like the steps that we did for StatCrunch. Right. So we went to stat, and then tables and frequency. Right. So that's just the menu things that we went through to get to that. And don't forget, if you look in the ebook for this section, at the very end of the section, there's a technology guide. And you can find the spot where it says for StatCrunch, and see step-by-step of how to do this, step-by-step directions if you ever forget. Right? So then now what we want to do is construct what's called a relative frequency distribution of the day of week. Right? So to do that, I'll start another table. So we have days of the week. So I'll just write down day. Well, I guess I should just say just day. And then we could just label frequency, and then what we're after is relative frequency. So remember, if I scroll up to the first page, relative frequency is by taking the frequency for each item and dividing it by the sum of all the frequencies, right? So we found that the sum is 42, right? So if we add all these up, the sum equals 42. Oops. Right, and that was found in StatCrunch, right? So where it says count. So for each of these, for each of these we could write down the day, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And so for Sunday the frequency was 8, Monday was 5, 7, 6, 3, 4, 9, right? The frequency would be counted as 4. So to get the relative frequency for Sunday, I'm going to take its frequency, which is 8, and then divide by 42, which is the total number of frequencies we have, right? And I'm going to use an approximately symbol, right? So you can use an equal sign with a dot above it, or a wavy equal signs to mean approximately. So 8 divided by 42, and I'll round that to 2 decimals, is 0.19. 5 out of 42, round that to 2 decimals, and you get 0.12. And then we take 7 out of 42, approximating that is 0.17. Right, so I'm rounding all these to 2 decimal points. So then we'd have 6 out of 42, which is approximately 0.14. 3 out of 42 is approximately 0.07. 4 out of 42 is approximately 0.1. And then lastly, for Saturday, we'd have 9 out of 42, which is approximately 0.21. Right. So that's the relative frequency column. And theoretically, all of these should add up to be 1, right? 100%, or in decimal form would be the number 1. If that doesn't happen, it's because we rounded, right? So, it could be a little off. Maybe get like 1.01 or something of that sort. So then, again, this column here was kind of like our work, right, from before. So, typically we wouldn't show that column, right? So typically we would just have day, and then relative frequency, and then you would have Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and so forth until you got down to Saturday, and then just list 0.21. Let's see, Tuesday was 0.17, 0.12, and 0.19, right? You'd fill in Wednesday, Thursday, Friday as well, right? But that would give you that nice relative frequency distribution, that nice table, right? And you can see we already got that in StatCrunch. We got them both at the same time. So you can see that relative frequency listed here. Gives you the information. Alright, so the next thing that we want to talk about is a bar graph. So objective 2 is being able to construct bar graphs. So we have here a bar graph is constructed by labeling each category of data on either the horizontal or vertical axis, and the frequency or relative frequency of the category on the other axis. Rectangles of equal width are drawn for each category. The height of each rectangle represents the category's frequency or relative frequency. Right, so it just depends if you want to have a frequency bar graph or relative frequency bar graph, depending on if you draw it up to its frequency or relative frequency. Right, and if you go to go into the textbook, if you go to page, I think like 71, you'll see an example here where the bars are going up and down, going vertically, right? And then if you go to the next page, you'll see the same graph, the same information, but them going horizontal, right? So the bars can go horizontal or vertically, right? And actually this example gives you an example of a side-by-side bar graph. So notice you have two bars going side by side, where one in this case is 1990 and the other is 2017. So you're trying to compare these two years for each category, right? So we're going to get to that, but I just wanted to show you that, you know, just a quick example that the bars can, you know, go up and down or sideways, and it's still a bar graph, right? And that's something you probably already knew with that. So example 2, part A, we want to construct a frequency bar graph of the day of the week, right? So we're using the same Meyer data set. So you know, if you're doing this by hand, you know, we just need to create, you know, like an X and Y axis, and the highest frequency was 9, so I'm just going to label these maybe like to 10, right? So this, we can label this is the frequency. Title for the entire graph, we could say Marion Meyer online grocery deliveries. And then down here, you know, we would have day of the week. So we'd have, you know, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so forth. Then we just need to draw our bars, right? And I'll do those in a different color. So for Sunday, we need to go to 8. Right, I'll just draw the value above the bar. That's pretty standard, so it's something I prefer just to make it really clear to the reader. So we got 8, 5, and then Tuesday was 7. Remember, something that's important is the width of the bar should be the same. If not, that can be misleading, and we'll talk about some misleading graphs later on in the this chapter. So Thursday was 3, so we'll label that. Friday was 4. And then Saturday is 9. Right, so there's an example of creating that graph by hand really quick. So then, if you want to construct a relative frequency, the only difference is your y-axis is going to be labeled as your relative frequency, and you're drawing the bar up to that relative frequency. So you're using part B from the previous example, right? We're using these relative frequencies here, right? What you'll notice is the shape of the graph is the same, right? It still remains the same. Oops. Yeah, I'll just reverse the colors. How about that? So we have Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So the setup is similar. So we have day of the week. Maybe a title for the graph would be the same, which was Marion Meyer online grocery deliveries. On the y-axis, we can label this relative frequency. And remember, relative frequency is a percentage. And then here, I think I'm just going to go up by 0.05 each time. So 0.25 is big enough. And then I'm going to switch back to red and fill these in. So for Sunday, the relative frequency was 0.19, right? So we would just go this up to 0.19. For Monday, 0.12. Tuesday's 0.17. Wednesday's 0.14. Thursday is 0.07. Friday is 0.1. And lastly, Saturday is 0.21. So there we have it drawn by hand. So now I want to show you how to make both of these in StatCrunch. So I'm just going to go back to the StatCrunch tab we had opened. I'll just close this. So the menu things you want to look for. So first let's make a frequency bar graph. So you're going to go to graph, go to bar plot, and then go with data. And then we want day, we're using that variable. The where we'll leave blank, group by we'll leave blank. We'll leave that be split bars. We'll leave this be frequency, and if you want relative frequency you can just select that. And then I'll just leave this value ascending. We'll leave all that the same. We can click check this to display the value above the bar like I had. Here you can change colors. I'll just leave it on the basic. And then here you can add labels as well if you'd like. So for the X label, we could say day of week. The Y-axis was frequency, and the title that we wanted to use was Marion Meyer Online Grocery Deliveries. Right. So then we can hit compute, and we get that graph. Right. And if I make this a little wide, bigger, you can see all the parts. Right. So then if I want to change this, I could go through the same steps and get a different graph. And notice from here you can go to options. I can save this. I can copy it, like paste it into Word. I could print this, download this as an image file. So there's some different options here that you can do. So I'm going to go to edit, and what I want to do is change this to be for part B. So I want to use the same stuff and make a relative frequency. So all I have to do is excuse me, change the type to relative frequency, and then I'll change the y-axis label to be relative frequency, and then I can hit compute, and it updates. And now we created part B's graph using StatCrunch. Right? So not too terribly difficult. So then the next thing that we want to look at is understanding what a Pareto chart is. So a Pareto chart is a special type of bar graph where the bars are drawn in decreasing order of frequency or relative frequency, right? So you start with the biggest and go down to the smallest, right? They're in order. So we can do this pretty easily in StatCrunch, and that's what I want to do for example 3. So we want to use that same Meyer data, but make it a Pareto chart. And I said to use just the frequency. So if you go back to StatCrunch, if I go to options, I can edit some things in here. So I wanted this just to be frequency, so that means I need to get rid of the word relative in the y-axis label. And then other thing we want to do is there should be an order by. So instead of the value ascending, we want to go to the count descending, right? So in other words, it's going to start with the biggest count and work our way down. And then if I hit compute, you can see that this now is in the form of a Pareto chart. right? So you can easily see like our busiest day for online grocery deliveries is Saturday, second highest is Sunday, and it puts them in order, right? So Thursday is the least day, right? So you can imagine that you know, seeing this information displayed in this way could be useful. Like for example, if you're a manager at Meijer and you're trying to plan for how many workers to have to help with the online grocery deliveries, right? All right. So then the next part here is just telling you what a side-by-side bar graph is. So it says, suppose we want to compare the educational attainment of native and foreign-born citizens. We could draw a side-by-side bar graph to compare data for two groups. The data set should be compared using relative frequencies rather than frequencies, because different sample or population sizes make comparisons using frequencies difficult or misleading. Right? So what that's saying is, you know, since there's not an equal number of native-born and foreign-born citizens, like in this case, we should use a relative frequency, a percent, rather than total number, right? So, you know, if you think about it, you know, if you have, you know, 100 people that are native-born but only 10 people that are foreign-born, it's not really fair to compare those two values, right? The total counts. So that could be misleading. So that's what that's meaning. So you want to use relative frequency for side-by-side bar graphs. Right? So then, example 4, we want to use the information below, which is the educational attainment data of population 25 and older by gender. We want to use that to create a relative frequency side-by-side bar graph. Okay? And then so this data, I placed this in an Excel file on Canvas. So if you go into Canvas, go to modules, you'll see our data sets module, and I titled this 2.1 EX4, example 4. Right, so if I click on this and download this, you can you know, open this up, and I already have this saved on my computer, so I'm not going to do that. But you can, you know, save it to your downloads or wherever you want to save it, and then open that up. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up the file that I already have saved on my computer, and this is what you should get. Alright, so then I'm just going to select where the information is. I'm going to copy, so right click and copy, or you can do Control C right on your keyboard. And then if I go into StatCrunch, I'm just going to click here in variable 3, and you can't right click and do paste for some reason in StatCrunch. So if I just push Control on my keyboard and then V, or if you have a Mac, you can hit Command and V, and that will paste those right in here. And notice I clicked where it said like variable 3. I want these names to be in this top row. These are like the variable names, right? So then now what I'll do is I'll go to Graph, and then I'll go to Chart, and then I'll go to Columns, and then here we want to select the columns that have the frequencies in them, and then we want the horizontal bars. No, let's do vertical bars stacked, and then then we should hit compute. Whoops. Oh, well, this is a different type of graph. I didn't mean to do a stacked bar graph. Let me I should have done split option. So let me go to options, edit, vertical bars, split. Yep, that's what I meant to grab. Right, and then if I hit compute, we have that. Right. So one thing you'll notice is that these are frequencies, not relative frequencies, right? These aren't percentages on the left. So remember, we wanted to put this in terms of relative frequencies, right? So in order to do that, you'll have to do the following. All right, so there is not an easy way to have StatCrunch make the relative frequencies for you. So what I did is I went into my Excel document and made another column so you can see male REL and female REL. That's the male relative frequency, the female relative frequency, and then we just needed to count, figure out what those values were for each of those, right? So I also added in this column, which is the total, right? So this number represents the total number of males, this represents the total number of females. So, you know, how do you get 0.4? We're going to take the frequency of males that have the education level of none to 8th grade and then divide it by the total number of males, right? Just like we did before to get the relative frequency distribution. So you're going to do that for each of these values, right? So if I just randomly pick, let's say, this value, this is the female relative frequency for associate's degree. So you would take this value here, the total number of females that have an associate's degree, and divide it by all the females that we have in the data, right? And that gives you that relative number, right, when you divide those. So what I'm going to do is just take these values and type them into StatCrunch. So I call this male relative, female relative. So we had right, and then type these in for the female, so and then now we'll repeat the same steps as before. We'll go to graph and then go to chart and then columns, and then so we're looking for these two values, right? The male relative frequency, the female relative frequency, and then we want to do vertical bars split. I'll just leave it as basic 7 colors, and let's see, the other thing we can do, the row labels are in the column education. And then we can add some X and Y axis labels if you'd like. So the X axis would be the level of education. The Y axis would be the relative frequency. And the title, we can say gender and education attainment, right? Then if I hit compute, I'll get that graph, right? And so the difference here is that on the left side these are relative frequencies, so it makes it a little easier to compare. You know, there's not the same number of males and the same number of females, so it's best to always do relative frequencies there. Right. Alright, so that's how you can do that in StatCrunch. And then lastly, what we want to talk about is creating a pie chart, right? So a pie chart is a circle divided into sectors, and each sector represents a category of data. The area of each sector is proportional to the frequency of the category. So in example 5, we want to use the Meyer data to construct a pie chart of the day of the week. So I have here to do this by hand. I'm not going to go through all of it by hand, but just enough where you could do it by hand if you wanted. It's not really practical today to do a lot of chart building by hand, but again, I think it's good for you to know what the computer's doing, right? To get these, right? So basically, what you'd want to do is we would have, start out with my relative frequency distribution, right? So we'd have the day, the relative frequency, and then I'll make another column and I'll call it degrees in the sector, right? So our days were Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then the relative frequency, we already calculated that. That was 0.19, 0.12, 0.17, 0.14, 0.07, 0.1, and 0.21, right? Remember, those relative frequencies are percentages, so it's so there's 19% of our data involves Sundays, right? So then a circle is 360 degrees all the way around, right? So if I have a circle, there's 360 degrees in one circle. So then what you do to get the degrees in the sector is you're going to take the relative frequency and multiply by the degrees in the sector. So for Sunday, or not multiply by degrees in the sector, but multiply by 360 degrees, right? Sorry. So the degrees in the sector for Sunday would be 0.19, the relative frequency, times 360 degrees, right? So we want 19% of the circle to be Sunday, essentially. So that would come out to be 68.4 degrees. So for Monday, we would take 0.12 times 360 degrees and get 43.2 degrees, right? So repeating this process, you get 61.2 degrees and then 50.4 degrees, 25.2 degrees, 36 degrees, and lastly 75.6 degrees, right? So then if you're doing this by hand, right, you would start out with your circle that's 360 degrees all the way around, and for Sunday you want 68.4 degrees, right? So maybe get something like this. So this is 68. Whoops, I wrote 2, but I meant 6. 68.4 degrees. So maybe that measurement, that corresponds to Sunday. And then, you'd have another piece of the pie, 75% should be a little bigger. That would correspond to Saturday, right? So you'd have each of these like pizza slices, which is like a sector, would be for each day of the week, and how big the slice is corresponds with the relative frequency. And you would need to use a protractor, in order to do that by hand, right? And if you forget what a protractor looks like, probably used one when you were in K through 12 to measure angles. Whoops, sorry. I don't know why I spelled. Meant protractor, not proctor. Right, so there's a picture of a protractor, right, where you can measure angles. Right, so I won't, like I said, I won't do that entire thing by hand, but just enough so you know what's going on. And then so to do this by StatCrunch, so the menu steps you're going to use are graph, and then pie chart, and then you're going to select with data. So let me show you how to do that. So let's go back to our StatCrunch. So I'm going to go to graph, pie chart, with data, and then we want to use the day column, right? That's where our data is, and then we'll display the count and the percent total. We can keep those, that's fine, and then we can make an X and Y axis, but we don't need to do that here. Or actually, there's no X and Y axis, right? That's grayed out. That's why I meant why we don't need to do that here. But the title, we could say, we could title it the same as before, which was Marion Meyer online. Oops, I can type online grocery deliveries, right? And then I can hit compute, and there's a nice pie chart. And I kept the count and the percentages checked in that box like by default, because you can see, so on Sunday we had eight Sundays in our data, which is 19.05%, right? So each of those are shown. The only thing, if I probably wouldn't publish this in this way, because that yellow, that Sunday, is kind of hard to read, even that light blue. So if you go into options, edit, you could change the color. So maybe pick soft 9 colors. Let's see how that looks, and hit compute. That looks better, right? Yeah, it looks a lot better. So you can pick different colors like that. I think there's even an option for like colorblind save colors in case you need to worry about that. All right. So that's all I have for this section. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.